Now, the verses that I just read, they do create quite a theological conundrum. And that theological conundrum could be summarized with this question. We're going to go here. We're going to ask this question, even though it's a big one, but I'm just going to ask it. How could a good God predestine evil? What could be more evil than Christ crucified, right? And the actions of Herod and Pontius Pilate and the Israelites who demanded, give us Barabbas and then crucify him. And then all of these people were doing what your hand and your plan predestined to take place. Well, I thought our God was infinitely and perfectly good. How could he predestine the most evil act in history, the crucifixion of Jesus? This requires a few responses and much more in the study guide, as perhaps you're becoming accustomed to the much more in the study guide. How could God predestine evil? Number one, it's important to explain what this doesn't mean. This does not mean that God forced people to sin or that God himself sinned. If God sinned, he wouldn't be God. And God did not force Herod or Pontius Pilate or the Israelites to sin. Think about Judas. When Judas departed from the Last Supper, when he shared that final meal with Jesus, it wasn't the Holy Spirit that filled Judas. Who was it? It was Satan. Satan entered Judas. And so it was both men and devils crucified Christ from their own wicked desires. It was their own wickedness. God did not force them, nor did God himself sin. He predestined it all, yet without staining his own hands. A second thing that I would say on this, and I have much more detail on this in the study guide, is that God, by his positive agency, only does good, holy, righteous things. Now, I use that language of positive agency intentionally. It goes to a Puritan theologian named Jonathan Edwards, and his treatise called Freedom of the Will. And I'm going to paraphrase what he says. And he compared, talking about this very subject, it compares what we're talking about to the sun. And it goes like this. He says, the sun, by its positive agency, only emits light and heat, never cold and darkness. Likewise, God, by his positive agency, only produces righteousness and holiness, never moral cold, never moral darkness. However, when the sun sets, cold and darkness set in. We would be wrong to conclude that the sun produced by its positive agency cold and darkness. No, these were the result of the setting sun. In the same way, God, by his sovereign permission, does allow, and I'm extending beyond the cross here, does allow to all events moral cold and moral darkness. God, by his sovereign permission, not by his positive agency, does he produce moral cold and darkness. Not by his positive agency does God sin against himself, but rather he fits these things into his plan without, by his positive agency, ever committing any sort of evil. And now the last thing that I would say is this. The Bible does not tell us on a case-by-case basis why God sometimes permits evil to happen and sometimes intervenes and prevents it from happening. The Bible doesn't tell us this, and he doesn't tell us why he sometimes rescues from suffering and sometimes permits the suffering. He does, apart from generalities, the Bible doesn't tell us the answers to those on any sort of case-by-case basis. But what we do know is this. When God created the world, it was a painless world. And that one day, God will recreate the world, the new heavens and the new earth, and it too will be a painless world. We also know that the bridge between these two worlds is Christ crucified. So rather than giving us a tidy explanation for the sin and the evil and the suffering that occurs in the world, God gives us his Son who suffered, and through his suffering redeems it and one day undoes it. And given the choice between a tidy explanation for the pain in my life and yours and in this world and God's Son, I'm going to take Jesus every time. The point, though, is that God is sovereign over it all. He is sovereign over all history, even wicked history, yet without staining his hands. The apostles knew this, and it was why, even when the nations raged, they were filled with peace and the Holy Spirit.